All right, here we are again for another biology video. This is the second part of the classical genetics uh, PowerPoint lesson, whatever you want to call it. In the last video, we talked a lot about vocabulary words like heterozygous and homozygous, about the fact that everybody has two copies of every gene, and that which copies you get, which versions you get, called alleles, will determine your phenotype, what you look like on the outside. Your alleles are called your genotype. In case those words don't make sense, we're gonna keep using them in this video, and hopefully they'll make sense by the end of that. So we left off with this question: what are the chances if two people have a child who is immune to COVID, right? And I gave you a bunch of different versions, a little bunch of different options about whether it was two normals, two immunes, a normal and an immune, and whether it was likely or not likely, or whatever it is. Now, the answer to that has to do with parents, right? This is the same thing that we got when we were talking about those two girls from the UK who were twins that didn't look like twins, right? If we want to explain how it would happen, we need to know about the parents. And in particular, we need to know the genotypes of each parent, right? And so immune here is a phenotype. Immune is a description of the person, but what about the genotypes of each parent? So first off, what are the possible genotypes of somebody who is immune, right? What two letters are they going to have? And we've been using the letter A if you don't remember. So two big A's, two little A's, a big A and a little A, which one would it be? And of course, immune means you are recessive. Hopefully you remember that, which means that you have two little A's. You have two genes that don't make the right shape to match the COVID virus, and that means the virus can't infect you. Now, again, I mentioned in the last video that recessive individuals are a lot easier because there's only that you know which genotype they have to be. But what if somebody who is normal? What are the possible genotypes of somebody who is normal? And of course, here the important part is the S on that. There's more than one way to be normal. You could have two big A's, but you could also have a big A and a little a. So people who would be normal would be able of producing different offspring depending on which genotype you are, right? And so if we know the genotypes of the parents, then we can actually calculate the likelihood, the chances that the child will inherit the genes. So you might remember that this is all going to be something called a Punnett square. But before we get to that, I want to just show you what it would look like, right? To remind us that we're talking about actual chromosomes. So we have two parents. The father has a genotype of big A, little a. The mother's genotype is little a, little a. The father is heterozygous. The mother is homozygous recessive. Now, that means that the father has two chromosomes, one that he got from his father and one he got from his mother, and those are two different alleles. They're different versions. One of them, we're going to say the little a has mutations in it, in that gene that the big A that he got from his father didn't have. The mother also has two copies of everything, right? But the mother has two little a's, so both copies are the little a version, the little a allele. Now, again, that leads to the father being normal and the mother being immune. So what was going to happen when these parents are going to have kids? Well, we know that even though you start with two of every chromosome, you have to give one of each, and you don't know which one it's going to be. It's going to be random. So, for example, perhaps the father is going to give that chromosome, right? It's a 50-50 chance. Big A or little a, which one it's going to be? It's going to be random. Now, mom here doesn't have any choices, really. It's still a 50-50 chance. It could be the blue chromosome or the red chromosome. In the end, it doesn't matter for this gene, because if it gives the big A or the blue little a, it's the same as if it was the red little a, right? Because it's still the same little a. This might lead you to say, well, what if there's two different mutations that both lead to the same problem, or the same, in this case, a good thing? If you had two different mutations in two different genes, and they both led to the wrong shaped protein, Well, we wouldn't call it a little a anymore. We would call it something else. Every different version needs their own letter. So in this case, it doesn't matter which one the mom gives. So that's one possible combination. However, the dad might give the big A, and the mom could give the other little a. That is another possibility. Now, dad doesn't have to give the big A. He could have given the little a. Mom still has to give one of those little a's. Let's say the blue one first. This time the dad gives a little a, and the mom gives her other little a, right? So there are 4 possibilities for how you could combine the 2 chromosomes from each of these parents, right? These 2 are going to be normal. These 2 are going to be immune. So we would say the chances of these 2 parents having a kid that is immune is a 50% chance, right? 2 out of 4, which is the same as 1 out of 2, right? You can do it in fractions, you can do it in percentages, but it is the same either way, right? So this is the basis of our predictions. We would usually use a Punnett square rather than drawing out all those different lines, right? So we start the same way. We would need to know the genotype of the parents. I'm going to say that, again, that the parent is heterozygous. So that parent has to give one of those 2 chromosomes, either the big A or the little a. So there's 2 possibilities there. I'm going to say the other parent is also heterozygous, which will lead to the same possibilities. Now, we know the possibilities. We always start step 1 with the possible gametes, which are the eggs or the sperm, right? I didn't put who's the who here, but each of these circles here represents either an egg or a sperm that could have been made by either the mother or the father. Now we need to keep track of the combinations. And so for that, we use this square. My head's in the wrong spot, right? So the square is just a trick to keep track of the combinations. And so the way you would do it is to take one of the parents and put their possibilities on the top. Notice, since you have to give one letter, you can't give both of them. One of them goes over the first box and the other one goes over the second box, right? You would not write a big A and a little a over the first box because each box can only have one of each letter, right? So big A goes over one box, little a over the other box. That's one of the parents. The other parent goes on the side. This case, you have the same options, so there's still a big A and a little a. Notice there's still one letter per box. So then it's just a matter of filling in the boxes. So I had to change the slide here real quick. Let's move it down here. Right. So here's one way that it would be written. Notice right here, right? It says we're going to cross. That's just a sciencey way of saying that they're going to mate together. We're going to cross the big A little a with the other big A little a. So just like before, the letters go above and on the side. Then you carry them down and over, down and over, down and over, down and over, which will give you that, right? The first box has 2 big A's because we have the big A on the side and the top. These 2 have a big A, little a, because there's a big A and a little a for each one. And then, of course, the 2 little a's come from the 2 little a's. Right? Those are the only combinations that you can get. There's only 4 possibilities when you are working out these crosses. So the Punnett square is a tool. It is not the answer. Usually, after you do the Punnett square, there will be a question that you have to answer. For example, what are the possible genotypes? Right? So a genotype, you have to remember what a genotype means. A genotype is the genetic description of each of the offspring. So what are the possible genotypes? Well, we have a big A, little a, or big A, that's possible. We could also make a kid that is big A, little a, and we could also make a little. Those are all the possibilities, right? There are 3 different ways that the kids could come out. Then it might ask you things like, what are the possible phenotypes? Now, again, you have to know what a phenotype is. A phenotype is the physical description, the real life, observable description of the offspring. And so there are 2 possible phenotypes in this case. Some of them will be normal, and some of them will be immune. Oops, that's not how you spell immune. That's an N. Yeah? Normal, immune. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, that's sometimes they'll just ask you what's possible. But if let's say that you were a geneticist, you are somebody who people will come to you when they want to know, hey, what's the chances that our kid will have this trait or not, right? And you could tell them, well, you could be normal or you could be immune. The very next question that people are going to ask is, well, what are the chances, right? Like some of them could be immune. How many of them would be immune, right? So then we have to go a little bit further. I forgot to change these to the A's, so those should have been A's. The ratio. Here's where we use math, but math in this case just means counting. Now, the most simplest way of doing it is to use a ratio, and that's what this is being shown here, right? With those two dots, they're trying to show a relationship. And what it really is saying is that how many of them could be big A, big A? There's one. How many could be big A, little a? There's two. How many are both little a's? There's one. You don't have to say it that way, though. You could use fractions, 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 1 out of 4. You could also use percentages, 25%, 50%, 25%. It does not matter. I do not care which way you do this, but you have to stick with it, whatever you choose. You can't just be like 1 to 1/4 to 25%, right? Like you can't just mix all the numbers together. It has to be all the same. So that's the genotype ratio. There's 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. Same thing could apply to the phenotype ratio. We know some are normal and some are immune. 3 of them are going to be normal because they have the dominant normal gene and allele, and then 1 of them would be immune, right? And again, you can make this be 75% to 25% or 3/4 to 1/4, right? There's multiple ways to do that. So in the end, this is where your grade mostly comes from. These are the questions that the people want to know. The Punnett square is the tool that you use to get to the answer. When we end up doing these things for points, you will get points for showing your work. You will get some points for doing the Punnett square, but the majority of the points come from the answers to the questions that you will ultimately put down, right? So finally, that leads us back to this question. What if you can't afford to genetically engineer your child? Do you really want to have a kid who's immune to COVID? Well, there was all these different possibilities of combinations. But now we know that these words, oh, I gave it away, these phenotypes are not everything you need. You can't determine it just by phenotype, by looking at people. You have to know their genotypes. So there are 6 possible ways for you to have parents in this case, right? You could start in the upper left with 2 parents who are normal and also homozygous dominant, right? And so first off, you need a bunch of Punnett squares because you have to do squares. Now, at the upper left, you have 2 big A's. 1 big A goes over each box. That's the first parent, and here's the second parent. Now, maybe you looked at this and you didn't even need to answer. You didn't need to do the square because you might notice that when everybody has big A's, all the kids are going to have big A, right? Which means that none of them are going to be immune. There's no chance for immune kids from these 2 normal people. The second box down here has 2 normals again, but now one of the parents is a different genotype. Even though they're still normal, they are different genotypes. So one parent goes on the top, one parent goes on the side, and then we fill in the boxes. Now, both of those boxes are big A's. Those are all going to be normal. The other 2 boxes are going to be big A, little a's. But even though there's a 50-50 split between their genotypes, all of them have a big A, which means none of them are immune. Going down to the one below that, now we have a normal and an immune person. The normal, I'm going to put on the top. The immune person I put on the side. It doesn't matter. You could have switched those. Those can be flip-flopped. I fill in the boxes, and they're all the same. Because again, maybe you didn't need a Punnett square to realize that this parent has to give a big A. It's always going to be a big A, and this parent has to give a little a. There are no choices here. There's no diversity in these parents. And as such, all the kids come out exactly the same, and they're still all not immune. They're all susceptible because they all have a big A. Now, on the right-hand side, we're starting to get into some more different combinations. And this one in particular is pretty key. This is one of the most common problems you'll get, which are two heterozygous individuals. This one has the most diversity, right? Because each parent has a choice here. Again, I say the word choice, it's not a choice. Each parent has two different possibilities. One of the parents can give a big A or a little a, and the other parent could give a big A or a little a, which means that one of the kids will be big A, big A. Two of them will be big A, little a, but there is now one combination that leads to two little a's. There is a 25% chance that these two normal people will have a kid who is immune, right? 1 out of 4, 25% chance. Going down to the next one, the normal parent with the immune parent. Now this time, there'll be another 50-50 split. These two are big A, little a. The other two will be little, little, which means you'll have a 50% chance from this pairing of normal versus immune. Finally, two immunes, and maybe at this point you realize that if you have all little a's, then there's going to be all little a's everywhere. And these two parents will be 100% immune. The only way to be sure that you will have a kid who is immune is that you are immune and you also, the other parent will be immune, right? And again, what's interesting is that these are the only combinations. These 6 problems actually represent every single possible genetics problem you could get. Everything else is just going to be reading the questions and trying to get to this point, which we're going to see in a moment here. Now, finally, getting back to our question about what is possible or not. If you have 2 immune people, we now know that you have 100% chance. You are definitely going to have a kid who is immune. But what about the normals and the immunes? There are 2 of them that are normal and immune. And one of them has a 0% chance. The other is 50% chance. So I would put that box technically in the maybe. At best, you have a 50-50 chance, but you might have a 0% chance. So I kind of wanted to put the X in the unlikely box, but I kind of just put it over to the side and I made this part like kind of go over into the box, right? I didn't put the check mark like that. I put it there because it kind of is in the middle. It's kind of maybe, it's kind of unlikely. It depends on who you are. Finally, the 2 normals, there are 3 different versions of that. Some of them give 0% chance. One of those gives a 25% chance, which in my mind means that this is an unlikely situation. That even if you did have 2 people, excuse me, that have the right combination of genes to possibly make an immune kid, it's still only a 25% chance, right? So again, this is the real life applications of genetics. Who are the parents? What is the chances that their kid will have the traits that you are thinking about, right? And of course, we're going to keep doing this for a while now until we get the hang of it. One way to get the hang of it is to practice, right? So just like last time, you should go through and start practicing with these genetics problems. However, I might say that you should do question 4 right now, and then unpause the video so that I can explain number 4, and then you can pause it again to do the rest of them, right? So I'm going to do number 4 right here. First question, or first thing about these is that you have to read the question carefully. SpongeBob SquarePants recently met Sponge Susie Roundpants. SpongeBob is heterozygous for square shape, but Sponge Susie is round. We want to know all these different things, possibilities, what are the chances? So when you're doing these problems, it's always the same steps. Number 1, I need to know the genotypes, the letters that go with each of the parents. SpongeBob needs 2 letters to describe him. Sponge Susie needs 2 letters to describe her. Now, where do I get these letters from? I have to just come up with them, but based on the information. And the important word here is heterozygous. SpongeBob is heterozygous for square shape. Now, here's where you get options. Square, if you remember from the last time, square is dominant to round. So I could use the letter S here, but I don't like using S's because big S's look like little S's. So I'm going to use A's again. SpongeBob has a big A, a little a because he's heterozygous. Sponge Susie is round. There's only one way to be round. She has 2 little A's, right? So that's the hardest part. Read the question, figure out the letters. Now we can fill out the Punnett squares and answer the questions. What are possible genotypes? The possible genotypes are big A, and little, little. Some of them could be square. Some of them could be round. How do I know that? because these two have a big A, and so they are square. These two have little a's, they're going to be round. What are the chances that the child will be a square shape? 2 out of 4, 50%. What are the chances the child will be a round shape? Also 2 out of 4, and 50%. And there is our final answer, right? So if you just watched me do that one, now definitely you should go on to questions number 5, 6, 7, and I think there's an 8, and try those, because you've now seen basically how it works, right? It really doesn't change very much from that right there. Now, by this point, you should have already paused the video and done the practice problems, and I'm going to go over the other ones. All right, so now we're on number 5. Patrick met Patty at a dance. Both of them are heterozygotes for their pink skin color. Pink is dominant to yellow skin color. Now again, we always start with the same place. I have to give letters, genotypes, to Patrick and Patty. I need 2 letters for Patrick, 2 letters for Patty. It tells us that they're both heterozygous. So there you are again. For pink skin color is dominant to yellow. Once again, I don't like using P's because big P's look like little P's. So I'm still going to use A, right? It doesn't matter what letter I use, really. You can use whatever letter you want, but I use A's a lot because I like that I can tell the difference between the capital and lowercase. So we have our letters. Now we fill in the boxes, and we just did one of these in the practice on the video earlier in the slides. So you might remember that there's 1 big A, 2 big A little a's, and 1 little. What are the possible genotypes? This time, all of the possible genotypes are there. And still, some of them will be pink, and some of them will be yellow. How many of them will be pink? 3. These 3 are pink because they all have big A's. That's a 75% chance. 1, that guy right there, out of the 4 is all little A's, which is pink or yellow, right? Again, hopefully that makes sense, and that's what you already had on your paper. This one got a little bit weird. It ends up being on 2 sides of the paper, so there's like a break there. Doesn't matter. Now, this one, it's starting to get, these questions are getting a little more complicated, and it's giving a little more story about it. Now, it says everyone in Squidward's family has light blue skin, which is dominant skin color in his hometown of Squid Valley. His family brags that they are purebred, and if you remember from before, purebred is another way of saying homozygous, right? Basically saying that they're pure with light blue skin. But Squidward meets a nice girl who has green skin. Oop, that one didn't happen. Green skin, which is recessive, right? So again, we want to know about their children, but now we have to do a little bit more work. We always start in the same place. We need letters to represent Squidward and his lady friend. Now, this is the part where you have to do the reading and think about it. Squidward has light blue skin, so I'm going to use the letter B. And Squidward brags that he's purebred, so big B, right? Purebred means he has no other yellow genes inside of him. Kind of a jerk, obviously. He married a girl who has light green skin. Now, the light green is recessive. It told us that. So we know that these should be little b's, or whatever letter you used. Then we go through and we fill it out. Big B's and little b's all around, because Squidward only has big B's to give and his lady friend only has little b's to give. So the possible genotypes, there's only 1. And they're all going to be blue because they all have a big B. What are the chances of light blue skin? 100%. What are the chances of light green skin? 0. Are Squidward's children still purebreds? No, they are not, because they are hybrids. They are heterozygous. Again, I'm never going to use the word purebred on any of my assignments. This is just a practice thing, and I can't really change the words on it anymore, just like I can't change the formatting to fix this stupid line that's in the middle of the page. But hopefully you already had those answers. Now, here's also another thing that will happen. For question 7, you need to use question 6. So maybe, hopefully you didn't make a mistake on question 6, because then that's just going to mess up your number 7. If you did make a mistake on 6, maybe you want to think about going back and fixing that. Now, it's talking about Squidward's sons. That came from this. So Squidward's son, we already know, is big B. That doesn't really look like a B. Big B, little b, right? He marries a girl that is also heterozygous. So there's our big B, little b. Now we can fill in our boxes, and maybe already you're realizing there's a pattern here of 1 big B, 2 big littles, and 1 little little. The possible genotypes are all there now. The possible phenotypes are also all there. Some of them will be blue, but some of them will be green. Chances of blue is 75% because these 3 have big B's. Chances of green is only 25% because there's only 1 box with the 2 little B's, right? And so hopefully that one makes sense. This is actually what Mendel was basically doing. Mendel, of course, wasn't doing squids from SpongeBob, but he had, let's say, a green pea and a yellow pea, and he mixed them together, and they came out all green, right? Just like in this case, they came out all blue. Then Mendel took the babies of that generation, and they started mating them, and that's when suddenly the different colors started showing up again. He mixed a green and a yellow, and it made all greens. Then he mixed another green and a green, and they started making yellow ones again because they were heterozygous. In any case, hopefully this one makes sense. Finally, this is, again, more like a realistic situation, a little bit silly, but still realistic. It says Mr. Krabs and his wife recently had Lil Krabby, who has not been happy because Mrs. Krabs noticed that the baby has short eyeballs. Now, she thinks that the hospital mixed up her baby with somebody else's because Mr. Krabs has tall eyeballs, and she also has tall eyeballs. So this is the thing, right? Like, oh, I have brown hair, and my partner also has brown hair, but our kid has blonde hair, right? Sometimes I get this from students, right? Like sometimes the kids will come up to me and they'll be like, Mr. Raymond, I have blue eyes, but all my other family members have brown eyes. Like, am I adopted? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, we got to think about the genes here because there is a way for this to work. Maybe. But as always, we have to start in a certain place. We have to give letters to Mr. and Mrs. Krabs. Now, Mr. Krabs is homozygous for tall eyeballs, so he has 2 big A's, right? Homozygous, they're both the same. Tall, because tall is dominant over short. I didn't say that, but it does tell you here that short eyes is recessive, right? Now, his wife also has tall eyeballs, but she's heterozygous, so you need a big A and a little a. Now we fill in the boxes. And you'll see that, I forgot to fill out this thing. Mr. Krabs' genotype is all big A's. Mrs. Krabs is big A, little a. Lil Krabby has to be little little, right? The only way for Lil Krabby to be short eyeballs is to have 2 little A's. So again, maybe you didn't even need the Punnett square to realize that how are you going to get 2 little A's into Little Krabby when there's only 1 little A between Mr. and Mrs. Krabs, right? So the kids could be big A, or big A, little a, but they could not be little little. And all of these kids are going to have tall eyeballs. So did the hospital make a mistake? Yes. Well, that's one of the options, right? There is another option that maybe you've considered already, which is that maybe there is somebody else out there with a big A, little a, and Mrs. Krabs has a little bit of explaining to do, right? She has a little a. She could have given it. Mr. Krabs couldn't have given a big A, but maybe, I don't know who else is in the SpongeBob world that would possibly be the father, but these things do happen, right? And so in the end, that kid could not be the offspring of both Mr. and Mrs. Krabs, although it could still be Mrs. Krabs, right? But the innocent way of thinking of it is that the hospital made a mistake. So again, hopefully this all made sense. Hopefully you had these answers before I showed them to you, but if you didn't, hopefully they make sense now. And like I said at the last video, if you're not understanding these, especially now that we've done actual problems, because you are going to have to do more problems very similar to these for like 2 weeks now. So if you're having troubles, make sure that you come to office hours to get that sorted out, or else it's going to be a rough couple weeks here. In any case, see you next time.